Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us in conversation with Dr. Shyam Bhat and Mr. Trevor Weltman. Keeping in tune with today's theme, which is about reinventing yourself, today's session will deal with lifestyle transformation. Dr. Shyam Bhat is a psychiatrist, physician, and a writer. He has a rare combination of postgraduate training and American board certifications in two specialties, psychiatry and internal medicine. He's also board certified in psychosomatic medicine, which is the study of conditions at the interface of the body and mind. Dr. Bhatt combines these qualifications with a deep study and understanding of Eastern philosophy and healing practices, and has been called a pioneer of integrative medicine and holistic psychiatry in India. On the other hand, we have Trevor Weltman, who is currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Pacific Asia Travel Association. He has over 10 years of experience in Asia, spanning China, India, Vietnam, and Thailand. Trevor received his degree in Asian Studies from the University of Michigan, and he began his career at Google, where he worked as an account strategist and a mindset and management trainer. In addition to sales and marketing, Trevor has extensive training and speaking experience, having led courses about digital marketing, storytelling, personal development, and meditation around the world in both Chinese and English. He currently lives with his wife and two daughters in Bangkok, Thailand. So over to you, Trevor, to lead the conversation today.
Good. Good afternoon, everybody. I know for some of you, it's actually the morning, and for some of you, evening, seeing as this is a global call. So I should probably say good day or good evening, but good afternoon where I am based in Bangkok, Thailand. Very excited and happy to be here today. I think the full day has already been a pretty amazing program with more to come. And I feel incredibly grateful to be interviewing somebody whose work I find fascinating, and just from our brief conversation as well, very personable and really in tune with the subject matter of today, which is inner transformation. Dr. Bhatt, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Trevor. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and on this platform and to be speaking with you on this very important topic. Apologies, you can't see me. I've been struggling with some bandwidth internet issues, as you know, but I hope you can hear me clearly.
Sure, I can hear you and appreciate, despite those issues, you still being able to make it.
Absolutely.
Without further ado, I think I'm just going to jump to the questions, okay?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the first questions that was on the list was actually about transformation. Today with the program and in general, when we talk about inner work, transformation is a term that gets thrown around a lot. In your opinion, what are the different layers of transformation? And how does this transformation framework actually work?
Transformation is to actually change into something else radically different from who you have been or who you are, or rather who you think you are. Said another way, we all have certain patterns of behavior. These patterns are both in the ways we act, the ways we speak, and we react to situations. And then when you look at the biological aspects, it's the neural patterns of the brain. And so that creates our identity. And frequently, you know, as a psychiatrist and as a therapist, people come in during when life is difficult, or when something happens in their lives that make it difficult for them to cope. And usually when people face a difficulty in their life, they want the difficulty to go away. But what they find out in the process of actually surmounting that challenge is that the best way to surmount a challenge is to actually change, that the root, that the way to deal with a problem is to actually transform in a way that those problems are not problems anymore. And the issue is that, you know, people, all of us actually, we find it actually very hard to change. Change in terms of transformation, which means radical transformation. And the analogy is a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. You know, nothing of its previous being seems to be there in the butterfly. You don't see the caterpillar, and yet it was a caterpillar before it became a butterfly and sprouted wings and colors and so on and so forth. So the act of transformation is like that. When you actually become all that you can be, something that you are, that you didn't think of as yourself, and actually embracing and becoming that new identity. And because it involves leaving behind an old identity in order to become a butterfly, we have to let go of who we are. Transformation is an act of courage, and it's difficult because it involves actually breaking through patterns that we are used to. Now, even if a certain pattern, a certain way of being is difficult for us, it is still familiar, and therefore to let go of what is familiar is very difficult. I think the while transformation is the goal in many cases, it can be quite challenging, and that's important to consider. What are the steps involved? What is the resistance, and how do you transform? And of course, why should you transform in the first place?
If I can build on that, and that's I mean, there's many different directions we could take that response because there's so much good content in there. But this idea, one of the first things you said, and then the last thing, why to transform. One of the first things that you had said was, people typically come when they have an issue. There's a stimulus to come.
That's right.
Just ask a follow-up on that. Is that the best time to seek change, or is it possible to start building transformation when there's no external stimulus, there's no crisis or depression or something else? Can you speak to that a little bit?
That's a great question, Trevor. And you're right. I mean, ideally, it would be great if we could transform into our best self, into all that we can be, even when there are no difficulties and life challenges. But the truth is that for most people, until life challenges them, there isn't enough incentive or motivation to change. And what we see frequently with in working with people who've gone through difficulties, or just the average person, is that it is during life's difficult times, it is when life challenges us, that we are most likely to transform. And therefore, all spiritual traditions and philosophers from all over the world and ages have found and said that suffering and difficulty and life challenge is the fuel for transformation. And as human beings, when things are all right, and they are, like they are every day, and nothing is challenging us, then people really don't transform. So I actually think that some amount of challenge, some amount of discomfort, some amount of pain is actually a very important element for transformation, or at least as a fuel for transformation. And we talk a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, about the fact that trauma and difficulties create stress and emotional problems, and that's quite true. It does that. But what we don't talk about enough is, and something I'm very interested in, is post-traumatic growth. The idea that difficulties and challenges are the fuel for our growth. And we are talking now at a time when the entire world is facing a challenge, a difficulty, right? And this is, of course, causing a lot of emotional pain, a lot of stress. But this is also an opportunity for us to transform as individuals, as a society, as a planet, because it is going to shake us out of our complacence and our inertia. So yes, it would be nice if we could transform without having to go through difficulties. But the fact is, for most people, that's not going to happen. The incentive just usually doesn't exist.
Got it.
So, which is a good thing, I think. So what that means then is that when you're going through a difficult time, we often try to change something in the environment, and that's fine. We should try to change something if we can change. But maybe what we should also do, rather definitely what we should do, is also look at ourselves and ask ourselves, in what way should I adapt and change to this changed circumstance? What is life actually asking me to do? What is life challenging me to do? And it's interesting when you look at the stories of transformation. And as as you may know, Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist who set out to study myths, came up with this observation that myths from across the world have a very typical and common arc, which he of course called the mythic arc. And that is what we call the hero's journey, right? And in the hero's journey, which is really the story of transformation, And this, by the way, resonates with all of us, because somewhere deep inside, it's sort of what we call an archetype. It's there within us, whether it's part of our genes, it's part of our brain, it's what Jung called the collective unconscious. The fact is that this story of the hero resonates, and that's why, as you know, movie makers across the world have used the mythic arc to make stories, because it really captures our interest at a very deep level. And what is the mythic arc? It is that the hero is firstly living in a mundane world. He's living in his ordinary world. There is, he's going about his business. He has no interest in transformation, and everything is just fine. And then something happens, something quite, significant happens in his life, and he gets what we call the call to adventure. He's asked to start this journey of transformation, and he frequently, and when I say he, I mean he or she, them, I mean any gender, obviously, the call to adventure is often refused. It's called the refusal of the call, because we want to stay the same. We don't want to embark on the unknown, even if the unknown will finally yield great treasures within us. We don't want to do that, and so we refuse the call. But then what happens is that you keep getting called. There is another call to adventure, and eventually you cannot say no to that, because life has pushed you in that direction, and you take that first step. It's called crossing the threshold, when you actually move away from the world that you're used to into a new world. And as you get into that new world, you will face many trials, many challenges. You will have to slay many dragons. And then after many lessons and many challenges, you learn so many things about yourself and the world. And the hero comes back to his world where he began. But now that same world is different. It's radically different, because the hero has learned something, has transformed through this journey, and it comes full circle. So that's the mythic arc. That's the hero's journey, and that is the arc of transformation, even in seemingly ordinary things. Like if somebody wants to quit smoking, or somebody wants to go to the work out and have better physical health or better mental health, whatever it might be. This is the arc. You are in a life. Something changes. You may say, no, I want to keep living the way I do, but life keeps challenging you until you rise to the occasion, until you move forward in the journey, and then you embark on that wonderful journey of transformation. Sorry, Trevor, I think I missed the point of your question, but that's sort of the story of transformation.
Why? Not the direction.
Why? Now the question was, why should you transform? Well, you're called to transform because you don't have a choice. Either you continue to live the way you are living and then keep suffering the problems that you're suffering, because you cannot solve the problems, as maybe Einstein, I think, said, with the same level of consciousness that created those problems. So if you have a problem in your life, if you have a challenge in your life, and you keep trying to beat that challenge, it keeps coming up, then you must realize that change is required within you. And that is why you must transform, or rather why life will compel you to transform. But another reason you should transform is really to experience all that you can be. One of the things that really is so gratifying as a psychiatrist, as a therapist, is to see the amazing potential of human beings. We don't know who we can be. We don't know. And I'll tell you, Trevor, I'm always inspired by the people I meet, or, if it's not as if while they might, they gain something from the interaction with me, I gain so much inspiration, because I am reminded every day of how human beings, all of us, have amazing potential. We don't know the capacity that we have until we are challenged. And therefore, if we want to live this life fully and completely, if we want to experience all that we can be, then we must be prepared to transform and to let go of these patterns of behavior. So said another way, who are you right now? For the listener, who are you? But by the time we're 18, 19 or 20, by that time we are an adult. We have an identity. We have a name. We have beliefs. We have opinions. We have likes. We have dislikes. And we now think that this is who I am. But when you examine how we became that person, we realize that we did not have much conscious awareness or control over what happened to us and how we were formed. In other words, the person I became and I was at 18, or you are at 18 or 19 or 20, is not necessarily the person you really are or the person you can be. We didn't choose our genes. We didn't choose our parents. We didn't choose our environment. We didn't choose what happened to us as children. And every one of those influences shapes us so profoundly that it becomes our identity. And that identity, who we think we are, is not really who we are. The identity that we have, unless we have examined it, has been borrowed from others, has been forced onto us by society, by other people. And therefore, in my view, it is a sort of prison that we're not aware of. I call it the identity prison, the prison of of an identity that was given to us by others. For example, you have a child, and throughout childhood, this child, let us say, is told that they're not good at and math, let's say, or at sports. They constantly hear that. And by the time they're older, they just believe that. They'll say, I'm just not good at it. Why do you think you're not good at it? Because you were told that, and because that became your reality. Why another child who may be bullied as a child and felt very powerless as a child, and that pattern of powerlessness and perhaps their attempts to overcome that powerlessness stays with them as a part of their identity. Again, that is who they think they are. They may see the world as being either one where they have to dominate, or where they might be, subjugated or whatever. So whatever has happened to you in terms of all the history of all the experiences, that has created an identity. And what we have to do in order to really embrace our freedom is to examine that identity and to ask ourselves, what is the truth about me? What do I really know about me? Am I believing things that other people have told me, and that is preventing me from really seeing all that I can be? And therefore, we must transform if we want to claim our enormous potential. And those are some very good reasons, I think, for transformation, even if life doesn't push you in that direction.
An amazing answer. And again, so many different directions we can take this, but I want to bring it back, because you started going in this direction, and I want to bring it more to the topic of the seminar today, this idea of Youth 2.0. In the language that you're sharing about the hero's journey, or this story arc, this natural human story arc that Campbell discovered, or that he explicated. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of youth from around the world on this call today who have heard that call to adventure. Some of them are starting to wake up to the fact that they have these identities or these beliefs or these feelings that were given to them by others, and they're now trying to find a way to cross the threshold into their new person. What are their beliefs going to be? They're starting to make decisions, surrounding themselves with certain people, certain ideas, looking for new kinds of mentors and experiences.
Right.
So as they begin on this journey, a lot of what the outside world is telling us is externally: how to find the right job, study the right thing, get your six-pack, get your abs, all of those things, versus this internal journey as well. And so how would you, at that stage of your journey, with knowing that we have a youth audience today, how can they begin this journey, but make sure they do it in the right directions, not in one of these directions that's a fool's gold, or that's been ingrained in them by another set of people trying to tell them how to think, how to act, how to believe?
That is a fantastic question, Trevor. I think that's it's a very key point that we need to explore. In India particularly, when you think about, and by the way, so I spent about a decade in the US as a psychiatrist before I came back to India, and I've spent about 10 years now. And that gave me the opportunity to observe how culture, society shapes us as people. And in the 10 years that I was away and the 10 years I've been back since, India has gone through its own transformation, as you know, right? So where, interestingly now, it's a fairly global culture, in that India is also as individualistic now, or as capitalistic as America is. Now, it struck me that in India, at least in the old India, there were social norms which were, people had to conform to certain guidelines from society, from parents, in terms of what kind of profession you have to do. When I was younger, You had only two choices, engineering or medicine. Okay, there were really no other choices beyond that. I'm happy that I did what I did, but a lot of people I think weren't. They were pushed into doing something that they didn't want to do, or maybe in terms of getting married or finding your life partner. So many things were dictated by society. Now, in America, you contrast that with a culture where individualism and liberty was always very, an ideal that has been both enshrined in the Constitution and is part of American culture. And so when I first left India, I'm talking about socialist India, where we had not yet reached this kind of global economy and this culture, and moved to America, it struck me that in the land of the free, there was a lot of depression, anxiety, and stress. Why is that? And it really, really interested me, because I would move back and forth between these two cultures, and I would ask myself, why is it that when America has made such a important value as individualism and freedom so important, such a part of the fabric of the society, why is it that I see people struggling? And I saw something that it became clearer to me as I lived there, that while the individual is free, what they are not aware of is the fact that they have been trapped by a much more subtle force, and that is the subtle social forces of, which makes you believe that you're free, but makes you conform to certain ideals. You have to look a certain way, you have to look good, you have to dress a certain way, you've got to be popular, you've got to be extroverted, you've got to be cool, you've got to hang out with the right crowd. For example, even if you're a non-conformist, you will find a group of non-conformists. So you have a place. You don't really. There's no such thing as true non-conformism if you're part of the non-conformist gang. So what I saw there was the idea of freedom. While everyone thought they were free, in actual fact, they were trapped, and they were trapped by a more insidious force than the obvious forces that had trapped Indians, which is all the social institutions. So as I kept coming back to India, and I saw that India was changing, and here was the danger, and I still think this is the danger for our youth, that when you get past these social things that have kept you locked in, like parental pressure and social pressure, and you break free from that, what is more dangerous, or as dangerous, I'll say more dangerous because it's less obvious, because you kind of know, if your parents are pushing back or society is pushing back, it's very clear that something is holding you back, right? But the forces of advertisements, of media, of social media, these are so subtle that you're not aware that your identity again is being shaped by these forces, and you're conforming to these forces without realizing it. And so the trap that we can find ourselves in, and that increasingly many people are finding themselves in, is this, being part of this whole chasing something, letting the desires get the better of us, and suddenly we're chasing the ideals that have been that this society says is what you should be like. So today it may not be a doctor and engineer, but are you being forced to behave a certain way? Are you being forced to dress a certain way without realizing it? To be cool in a certain way, to be extroverted in a certain way, and that is what I worry about actually for people in our country. So true freedom then is, as you said, so the movie The Matrix, actually, when it came out, it's an old movie. You must have seen that, right? The Matrix. So what a fantastic metaphor for this. And there's a scene in that where this guy is eating a piece of steak and he's loving it, and he's saying, look, I know this is an illusion, but I'm enjoying it, so it doesn't make any difference. Right. And the whole movie of the Matrix, where humans are trapped by the machines, then they don't know that they're trapped because they're being fed images and things in their brain to keep them in a state of happiness or enjoyment. That is representative of the modern society that we are living in. And today, as we've moved in India, the danger is when we move from this prison of social institutions, the danger is that we will think that we are free without really asking ourselves the question, what do we really want? The youth are at, the great sort of the greatness of youth is that you can make a fresh start. The greatness of youth is that you are the fabric of our future society. The choices you make will determine the kind of world that we live in. And you also have the opportunity to start questioning the kind of society you want to create. So instead of just getting into the way of life around you, it's really important to ask ourselves the question as you, I won't say us because I'm not youth anymore, but as youth, the youth must ask themselves the question, what are my real values? What do I deem as important to me? What really gives me self-esteem? What gives me self-worth? For example, as you know, Trevor, for example, in much of the West and now much of the world, what gives people value is often material success. Unfortunately, many people have sort of conflated net worth with self-worth.
Sure.
The more money I make, the more successful I get, the more valuable I am as a person. And that is a very toxic idea, and one that you can easily imbibe in this culture. It's amazing how cleverly and insidiously the ads do that, right? You don't even know it. You're watching an ad, they show you a guy or a girl with this thing. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's jewelry, maybe it's a new phone. And the person is smiling and they're happy and they seem free and they seem confident. And before you know it, your brain has connected the two, and it's saying to you that unless you get that lifestyle, you are not cool, you are not a good person or a valuable person. And these ideas are so subtle, but they've been designed to seep into our brains and our minds. And therefore, if we don't exercise awareness and wisdom, we can be drawn into the same nightmare that is affecting hundreds of millions of us all over the world. Depression, anxiety, and stress is the way of life for human beings around the world, whether they are in the West and now even here in India and the East. And so the message is this: look, if you want to be truly free, we have to have the courage to transform, to let go of beliefs that we have been given by our parents and our society. Examine those beliefs. I'm not saying all those beliefs are wrong. I am saying examine those beliefs and decide what you really want to live by. Then you have to really be careful about social messaging and uh, and how that enters your mind, so that you can start taking decisions that will create this new society where eternal human values like compassion, love, connection, authenticity, these become the values that we guide our lives by. And I think if there's that's what the youth can do for our country. They have the courage, they have the freshness of thought. They are not bound by old social kind of norms. And I think, by the way, I'm a big fan of Youth 2.0, because I think every time I meet a young person, Trevor, and you're younger than me, but I don't know if you get that impression when I meet a young person. I really feel, what such a, I feel amazed at how mature the today's youth is, how much more aware they are of their role in the world, how much more connected they are of their larger responsibility, in a way that I feel that, 20, 15, 20 years ago, young people didn't have that kind of thinking. So I'm very hopeful. A lot has been written about youth today, saying that youth are entitled, they're this, they're that. But that's not true. What I see among youth today is much more sensitive to social causes, much more aware of what the planet needs, much more, idealistic in that way. And that idealism and that awareness of their role in the world, that really fills me with optimism.
Let Dr. Bart, if I can, I want to move on that a little bit, or I want to expand that, because
Sure.
I that I've come of age at the transition from sort of the offline life to online life. And if you go just a couple years younger than me, those are people who experienced all of their formative years then online. So I was, for those, I'm going to date myself here, everybody, but my final year of high school in 2007 was the year that Facebook just entered high schools. And of course, since Facebook, it has been the rapid integration of, mobile apps, cell phone, social media, et cetera, et cetera. So on the one hand, these ideals that you speak of are practical realities for many of the young people in the world. This drive towards social justice, environmental security, equality in terms of economic distribution. We've never had more students around the world and young professionals aspiring or studying social impact businesses or wanting to join these kinds of enterprises, or frankly build their own. At the same time, this is because they're inheriting larger environmental devastation, larger social inequality than at times in the past, or they're being made aware of it. So to bring this back to the inner journey, I agree that there's an opportunity for these youngsters in the world to step into this role and actually teach the generations who came before them how to lead and how to have an impact. But how do they manage that aspiration also with some of the pressure that these are large problems to solve, that they may be young or they don't have the experience? And a further point to that is, how do they know they're making the right decision? Because I find that, and this will be a two-part question. First is how to manage the large issues that they see that they want to have that impact on. But second, I think there's what we call FOMO, the fear of missing out, or that they may make a wrong choice. So they may not even take a step in the direction anyway because it feels uncertain, or it might go against the new hidden dominant norms. So how do they make those decisions? How do they have that confidence and gird themselves from the issues at the same time?
Well, the first question is how do they, what do they do in practical steps, right? I mean, what do they do practically in order to be part of this transformation of society? And, it starts small. I think, there's a saying, there's an old quote, which you might remember. I don't remember it verbatim, but it's about how initially we think about changing the world. But then when we get wiser, we realize we have to start by changing ourselves. And so the first thing, of course, for any individual, whether young or old actually, is to ask ourselves, what should I do in my own way with the gifts that I have to make a difference in life, to contribute to society, to contribute to the world, and to feel a sense of personal fulfillment. So the journey begins with an awareness of what one can do, what one is good at, and what one enjoys.
Yeah.
And therefore, it starts from looking within, Again, it goes back to what I said. Question what you've been told by society when you start this process of introspection and looking at yourself, and ask yourself truly, what really resonates with you? The fact is that human beings, we do have an internal compass. We have a sense of what is right or wrong for us. We all have it. The other voices might try to drown out that instinct, and of course they might succeed at times. But if you take time to introspect, to be quiet and still with yourself, you will feel what you really, really want to do. If you notice what you enjoy, then you realize that there are things that connect with you. So ask yourself, what is it that you really enjoy doing? What would you spend your time doing, and you would really totally completely connect with that.
Mm-hmm.
So by the way, can you hear me, Trevor? Something happened with my signal.
I can hear you much clearer, actually.
Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
You can hear me. Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is to have that awareness of what one is good at and what one really enjoys doing. The second thing is to start taking steps in the right direction. And here, the youth in particular, but I think many of us, have to be careful of the need for instant gratification.
Yeah.
I think for many people, we have the right intent. We might even figure out what we want to do and what we enjoy doing and what we can get better at. And the goal here is to get so good at it that you really make a significant contribution to society. And I truly believe that there are some things you might do for enjoyment. There's some things that you will do for enjoyment, but that will also be a calling that that you're born to do that. And by the way, contrary to, I think, a lot of what we read, it's not as if everybody will have a grand passion that takes them in that direction. So the idea that you have to follow your passion, I think, is an idea that puts a lot of people in confusion, because many young people come to me and say, look, I don't have a passion particularly. I'm not sure what that means. Passion also can take time to develop. So you start where you are. For example, a person might just say, look, I love, I notice visual elements in the world around me, and I enjoy colors and I enjoy sketching. And at that point, the person may not be overwhelmingly passionate about it because they haven't yet discovered how good they can be at it. But they've discovered a seed, a seed that will grow into a huge tree if they give it the right conditions to flourish. And so once you know what that initial interest is, then practice every day and make that a practice where you continue to develop that skill. And as you get better at it and you know more about it, you will start um, feeling more engaged with it, more passionate about it, and you'll be able to contribute more. I think one of the issues is, as I was saying, a young people today have are much more driven, I think, than a lot of us were in the past. More idealistic in the sense that very aware of the world and the need to contribute. However, because we live in a time of social media and a time where the press and the media glorifies success at a very young age, a lot of young people also put enormous pressure on themselves to succeed very early, so that if by their 20s nowadays, I find that even by their late 20s or mid 20s, somebody hasn't become very successful, they're thinking in their mind already, Mark Zuckerberg was a billionaire by my age, and they start feeling like they are not significant, or that they're failing in some way. And that it's important to get the right timelines. Yes, some people will start early and might peak early and so on and so forth, but for other people it takes time. Everyone has their own timeline. So it's important to have a longer timeline as you embark on this journey of finding something that you like doing, expand that into mastery of that subject or that skill. And when you're able to put all your energies, it might seem like a small area. You might say, hey, I'm only sketching, or I'm only doing, I don't know, coding or whatever it might be. It might seem like a small thing, but the deeper you go into it, the more you master that domain, the bigger it becomes in terms of the impact that you can have. So the key things are: know where you are right now. Ask yourself what beliefs you've been given that are perhaps not true. Look at your internal compass, your sense of what really resonates with your being. Ask yourself what makes you alive, what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel like you're really engaged with your intellect and with your creative part of your brain and your entire being. And then practice that every day, master that, and passion will come along the way. And then that, will be the vehicle for you to realize yourself as well as make a huge, profound change and transformation in the world.
Dr. Bhatt, that's a fantastic answer. We have 7 minutes left, so I want to ask a very practical question.
Sure.
I'm going to try to do this in a way that it unites some of what you said at the very beginning and what you just ended with here. Because you've talked about this idea of pain or a challenge as a stimulus that we can then turn into the opportunity for transformation. And here you've just said this idea of we have to pay attention. What are some of the ways that individuals, particularly people in their late teens and early 20s, can pay attention? So of course, you have gone deeper into the field of psychiatry and inner development than many people. What are some of the tools they could do? Do they need to go see a therapist? Can they do things on their own? Are there any resources that you would point them towards where they can actually start to initiate this greater awareness of themselves, so they can hear that voice say, do this, or somebody told me to be that way, I want to choose another direction?
Trevor, I often wish that our schools would have a whole subject for emotional intelligence and emotional health. And I know that some schools have a bit of that, but by and large, it's not really a huge part of our school curriculum, which is unfortunate. Because the one thing that we all need to learn is we need to learn to know ourselves, to have the tools to understand ourselves, our feelings, our thoughts, our beliefs, and to manage is not a good word. Let's say to optimize, that's not a good word either. Help me out here, Trevor. But, to actually make the best of what we have, right? So we need those tools, and we don't have those tools. And what are those tools? Well, primarily, a young person like all of us should know and be aware of what they're feeling. They should know the difference between thoughts and feelings. So they're able to connect with their own feelings, which are basically what are feelings. Feelings are emotions. And what are emotions? Emotions are non-verbal, visceral signals in your body and mind that is actually compelling you to move in a certain direction. Thoughts are ideas, words, or images that either you think about in response to something, or that are instilled in your mind from other sources. So one of the key things for people is to develop the capacity to stay with their feelings and to know what they're feeling. And that can be done through meditation is actually a great practice. And I know obviously many people here are part of the Heartfulness group and are familiar with meditation practice. And the reason that meditation as a practice has stood the test of time across thousands of years is because it still is one of the most potent and effective ways in which we can start to understand ourselves. To stay with oneself, to notice without judgment, to just witness what is happening is extremely important, particularly in today's world where our attention is being taken by things outside us, the internet, Netflix, social media, and all of that. So that's one. Two is to read widely and to expand your mind through conversations, meetings, and readings from as widely as possible, to be exposed to different ideas. And when you read widely and you're exposed to different ideas like that, that is a great way for you to understand yourself. And certain ideas will resonate with different people and will spark off great journeys of transformation. That's very important. Thirdly, it is to look at your own peer group, to look at your friends. Now, there is a saying that, we are the average of the five people we spend most of our time with. And it is true that your friends and your peers, particularly for young people, because you spend a lot of time with your peer group and very attached to your peers, it's important to ask yourself, what kind of friends do I have? Let me, while it might seem a bit clinical, it's actually very useful to study the personalities and characteristics of your friends, of your peers, those who are closest to you, and that will tell you a lot about yourself. What do you see in about yourself when you're in your friends? So the kinds of friends you hang out with will tell you a lot about your own characteristics, even if you seem different from your friends. The other thing that tells you a lot about yourself is actually things you dislike about people, strangely enough. Carl Jung made the point that what you dislike about another is often something that you've suppressed in yourself. And one of the keys to evolution is not to live a life where you're fully aware. If there are parts of you that are suppressed, that you're, for example, by that I mean that maybe somebody is assertive, but they've hidden that side because of things that happened to them as children. Maybe somebody is creative and they've hidden that side. Maybe someone is extroverted and they've hidden that side. There are elements to our own personality that we may not know because of circumstances that shaped us while we grew up. And when you're with other people, two things. One is what you like and what you dislike, and both of those will tell you about your own qualities, right? What you dislike will tell you about what's hidden within you, and what you like will tell you usually what is more overt within you.
Dr. Bart, Dr. Bart,
yes.
We have 1 minute left.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so those are the top things, Trevor, in order to understand yourself and then to begin this journey of transformation.
Wow. So I'm so happy we went off script.
Likewise.
The answer to the first question about transformation, I think, took us in a really exciting and important direction. Especially, I think back to who I was and what I was thinking at 19 years old and 25 years old. And some of the points you raised, particularly about India in transition, or some of these different markets in transition, and how to retain or how to be more aware of some of the stories that we're being told, even though we don't realize we're being told a story. I think for me, one of the main takeaways is just this idea that we're all on the hero's journey, and at some stage. For many of them who are on call, they're at that beginning stage. They're starting to hear the call to take a journey. They're looking for that ability to cross the threshold. And I think with many of the examples you've given, particularly the, pay attention, look at what you're good at, and then look at what you enjoy. We're not taught that.
Absolutely.
I think that those in and of themselves are worth everybody's time today. So Dr. Bhat, thank you very much, sir. This was a really informative session for myself, and I hope for everybody else. And thank you to the organizers for having us today.
Thank you, Trevor. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I really value your questions. And thank you to the organizers for Youth 2.0. Thank you.